Punch the timeline.
And welcome to another episode of Punch the Timeline. Jarrod here, as always, here to spread the word of great comic books to you. For the first time, we're doing a creator interview. We have Ed Kuehnel from the book Invasion From Planet Wrestletopia. It's a great book. I'm going to go ahead and just throw it out there before the interview starts. I say it in the interview. If you like wrestling, you're going to like this comic. If you like comics, you're going to like this comic. This book manages to pull off the unthinkable and have an entertaining wrestling comic book. I talked to Ed a couple of days ago about his book, which has a Kickstarter that is active right now. You can see the link in the show notes. And let's go ahead and check out my interview with Ed Kuehnel from Invasion From Planet Wrestletopia. Ed, how are you doing today, sir?
I am doing great, Jarrod. Thanks for having me on the podcast. I'm ready to punch some timelines.
Thank you. Thank you. Invasion From Planet Wrestletopia.
Yes.
When I read this, I was like, this is the funnest concept. As a wrestling fan, I love it. You know, as a comic fan, I love it.
Yeah.
When I try to describe it to people, I have to like pull up the description because it's just so out there. You got to tell me how this idea came out.
So it started, of course, with Matt Enton and I. So Matt's my co-creator, my co-writer. We have this mutual love of pro wrestling, especially while growing up. I don't think either of us watches the product like currently, regularly, right now. It was a huge part of my life. I was obsessed with it. When we're both writers, and we met. We both work in the video game industry, and we met in the early 2000s working at the same studio. So what we've done over the years is when we can, we'll scratch out time to work on our own stories. And with Wrestletopia, I think it was, Matt gives me credit for the initial idea, which was sort of like, I think I just latched onto that old trope of TV signal going out into space, being intercepted by aliens. They find out about Earth, and it's not good news for us. So it's a little, it's not, maybe it's a little bit like, I don't know, Mars Attacks or a lot of other sci-fi movies or books that kind of thing. And then it was, well, what if they were wrestlers? We got onto the idea of like Earth in a steel cage, which we did in the comic. And so we just thought that was funny, planet of aliens from wrestling. It's real. It's their way of life. Like, they don't vote for president or whatever. It's just, you have to like wrestle for it. And like Ric Flair would have been like the prime minister of Wrestletopia because he had the belt, right? So that we started there, and then it was the next step was, well, how, like, what would this, if they intercepted a TV signal from Earth that angered them so much, what would that be? Well, it was like, well, it'd have to be a wrestler cutting a promo. And the promo would have to really get under their skin. And that led us to, rock and roll Rory Landell, the protagonist, really angry with his promoter because he screwed out of the world title. Well, what's better than the world title, right? So he gets on live TV and he's like, I don't care about the world title. I'm the galactic champion of the universe, brother. And that's what pisses them off because, of course, on the planet Wrestletopia, there is a galactic champion of the universe. He believes, he sees this as a challenge, as a threat, and it's on from there. So I think that's sort of the gist of it, is as to how we arrived at the initial story.
The thing that caught me instantly, one of the first pages, is the signal being intercepted.
Yeah.
And they're like, identify yourself, brother. And he like introduces them from Deep Gorge Wrestletopia. I love that.
Yeah, that was a really fun scene. So yeah, like you're saying, we do kind of a cold open at the beginning of the first issue, where we jump forward in time a bit, and it's this Wrestletopian whose job is just to monitor space, intercepts the signal, calls into the HQ, and so this, I guess that's a good example of like, okay, for Wrestletopians, this is their way of life. He doesn't just press a button, he has a microphone come down the ceiling of a spaceship, and like you said, he doesn't just call in. It's like he announces himself and tells us how much he weighs and where he's from. and we just liked them, like saying brother a lot, like, yeah, again, it is their way of life. It's real. There's no kayfabe. It's just
everything's wrestling. Yes.
Wrestling. Yeah.
Between you and Matt, who's the bigger wrestling fan?
That's interesting. Like I said, neither of us. It's funny. We both pay attention to it. I mean, to be honest, it's like we get all our wrestling news and stuff now from Twitter. I would probably say that as a young person, so I'm a little older than Matt, and therefore I discovered wrestling in the late 70s as a small child. It was like 7 years old. And when you discover it when you're 7 years old, 7 years old, you believe in Santa Claus. When you're 7 years old, you believe that wrestling is neither unscripted nor choreographed. That
yes.
This is real combat. and I was absolutely hooked. And the reason so I mentioned before we started recording that I grew up in Portland, Oregon. We had Pacific Northwest Wrestling, which was an NWA territory. And so it was the type of territory where you had your local guys, but also Ric Flair would swing through town. I saw him wrestle twice in person. Dusty Rhodes was on the card for one of those.
Wasn't Piper big?
Piper was it was not the first place he wrestled, but I think that the deal was it was Don Owen that really launched his career. And I believe, actually, if I remember my wrestling history correctly, this is all to prove that I was the bigger fan for a time. But I think he called like whatever Jim Crockett or one of these guys in Atlanta and said, "You got to get on this Piper stuff. You don't got to not sleep on Piper. He's special." Piper went to I want to say Georgia Championship Wrestling and really got on started to become a star. He was forever grateful to Don Owens, and even while he was with, as it was known then, the WWF, and was a huge, the top heel, and was a household name almost. He refused to wrestle in Portland when the WWF would go through. And not only that, he went one step further. I saw Roddy Piper wrestle against Playboy Buddy Rose in Portland on an NWA super card while he was with the WWE / WWF. Like, he told McMahon, "I'm going to wrestle on a Playboy Buddy Rose on an NWA card in Portland." On behalf of Owens' family. He was so grateful to them. So I think I was just, at least probably at that time, incredibly obsessed with wrestling. Matt, I think, came to it a little bit later when kayfabe was either officially, at least on paper, a thing of the past. So I think I might win if there is
I'll allow it. Like you said, you grew up in Portland, and that the older I get, the more I appreciate the territories.
Oh, yeah.
And I read The Death of the Territories. I can't remember who wrote that book, but it's just talking about the lengths that Vince McMahon went through to just basically take all these territories and watch them stab each other in the back to go global. Because the stuff he went through, he would just he would come in, do a show close to your territory, and if it did well, he'd go a little bit further in, and if it didn't do well, he'd pull out. But this book reminds me of those territory days. Was there a particular area that inspired it?
So some of the inspirations, in the comic book, we kind of start in the territory era. We don't stay there for long. The only territory I knew was Pacific Northwest, because it was before cable even. It was on TV every Saturday night on a local channel. And there were tape traders, and that was it. So now I will say, though, you could go to any convenience store, but you could get wrestling magazines fresh, hot off the press every week. And I bought every single one for a time. And so you could learn about the Florida territory and other territories through the magazines and get some knowledge and some limited sort of exposure and of reading the magazines. But beyond that, you didn't really know too much what was happening in Florida or anywhere really. Cable changed all that. I remained a fan long enough. I started with just Pacific North Wrestling was all we had. When cable showed up, ESPN in the very early days, they had nothing to show, would show some AWA stuff like at 2 in. Territory-wise, I guess it would be Pacific Northwest Wrestling and then Georgia Championship Wrestling, which was still strong for a while before, like you said, it all collapsed and kind of became, at least for a while, homogenized in the U.S. under McMahon's brand.
Vincent Kennedy McMahon. Was there a particular wrestler that Rory Landell is inspired by, or is he just the ultimate brother?
I think that he's definitely an amalgam of these guys, of a lot of these guys. And it's funny, when people who read the comic we've heard a lot of names. Some people say, "Oh, I hear Randy Savage," or I hear, we've heard Hulk Hogan, we've heard other names. We did look at Superstar Billy Graham quite a bit. He's an interesting character in a world of interesting characters. He's pretty interesting, and he was, even in Vince McMahon's own words, kind of like ahead of his time. Like in the documentary that they put out, WWE put out on him, McMahon goes on the record as saying, had I been in charge, Superstar Billy Graham probably would have been Hulk Hogan, right, before Hulk Hogan showed up.
Yes.
And Hogan's definitely, I think, all these wrestlers borrow from each other, and Hogan is definitely borrowed from Superstar.
Superstar seems to be the prototype.
Yeah,
for Hogan.
Yeah, for sure. So we looked at him quite a bit because he had a hard fall from grace, and.
Do you remember when I was younger? Superstar Billy Graham was on the downhill slide, and remember when he had his hip replacement, and they showed that surgery on Superstars?
I actually have a vague memory of that. And was when he was with the WWE?
Yes.
He's still, and he can maybe, I do have a really weird, just fleeting memory of that.
Because it's just like a hip socket, just right there on TV, and you're like 7, and you're like, what the hell?
And I have a fleeting memory of him in the documentary. He talks about how he tried to make one weird comeback in the Georgia Championship Territory NWA as sort of like a kung fu type dude. And I remember, and he's like, it did not work. It ended as soon as it began. But I think I remember his first promo when he came out, and he kind of looked like Lee Marvin, sort of. I was just like, what are you doing?
Let's talk about the art.
Yeah.
A couple of artists on this book, right?
We had a crew of artists, so we were Matt and I self-financed everything, and it took 3+ years to get 6 issues out. And the first one's 32 pages. The next 4 are your standard 24 pages of panels, and then the last one is 45 because we're poor planners and we hadn't done a comic book before. But it's hard to keep we paid all the artists, but it's hard to keep a crew together for an indie project. We started with Dan Scotty, who is a magnificent artist. He had some help on issue 3 from David Hahn, who did the inks, but we hired all professional artists to do this. And Marissa Louise did the colors for the first 3 issues, and Dave Lanfear did our lettering. They're all professionals, and the book looks amazing. Starting with 4, 5, and 6, we had a new colorist in Jason Lewis, and then Gio Butler came in to do 5 and 6, and Kendall Good, who actually had done a lot of art for the WWE comics that I want to say Boom puts out. We were able to get him to do issues 4, 5, and 6, and their art styles aren't so far apart.
Yeah,
between him and Dan. Some people have said they didn't even notice.
It flows really well. Yeah.
Yeah, it's not a huge. It's not like you're reading it, and all of a sudden you're like, "Hey, what happened?" So yeah, the books look great. It was a great decision to hire professionals. All 6 issues are finished. They're out there in digital form, and as you know, we're doing this Kickstarter right now. Whenever people hear this, it'll still be true because we just launched the Kickstarter, and it's to put all 6 issues into a collected print volume or trade for the first time, and with some exclusive bonus material. Really excited for this because it'll be, everyone will have a chance to get the whole series in one volume, which is what people told us they wanted. And it's off to a pretty solid start, the Kickstarter.
I love the flow of the art. There are some scenes like Mini Macho. When Mini Macho is in action, that is a thing of beauty. The way that flows, that lucha libre movement.
Thank you. I was kind of Matt and I have worked together a long time. We've worked together on a lot of video games and other things. So you develop sort of, some roles within the partnership, and I probably did most of the action. I think Matt just doesn't have the patience for it. He's like, you handle it. So I went and bought. This was a great excuse. I went and bought some WWE action figures, right? And I'm just playing with them, and I did try to make an effort to be like, okay, what is going to make this particular fight interesting, and that unique within this miniseries, at least, that we haven't seen already, and to give the artist enough direction to say, here's what we're going to do. Here's what we're going to do. Right. Here's Mini Macho's plan. Yeah, I think I worked out, and I'm glad I spent real time on it and got to play with toys.
My favorite scene of this entire book, my favorite panel of this entire book, is when the Wrestletopians are coming down, and it's the panel where they're attacking the White House. Yeah. And the guy's like, protect the president. And there's a guy throwing a picture-perfect German suplex. I laughed out loud. My wife was like, what the hell are you laughing at so hard?
Yeah. I love that. And Matt, I think he probably wrote all. So the one true galactic champion is Manifest Destiny, who comes from Planet Wrestletopia. And he challenges Rory on live TV, to a title unification bout, right? Who's going to decide who's the real galactic champion? And meanwhile, like you said, we got Wrestletopians all over the planet, basically sort of taking over the planet, so that and looking for Rory. And I love that. Yeah, I love that series too, because Matt wrote all this dialogue that we're reading while we're seeing what's happening all over the planet. And I think actually, for that one, to give credit to Dan Scotti, I think we were just like, we didn't script the action too much. We were just like, okay, they're at the White House, and they're like putting Secret Service in like the camel clutch and whatever, and then Buckingham Palace, okay, they're doing that. We just kind of let him use his imagination for the physicality. Yeah, that was definitely part of the fun of a planet Earth being invaded by wrestling aliens, right?
And when you're a wrestling fan, you can kind of like see the action going on in your head, because you can kind of see the sequences starting. You're like, oh, that's gonna be a pile driver.
That's gonna, yeah. He's setting him up. For
like, here it comes. Okay, so I know that any coincidence, Fatback Billy Mangum, is that Bill Watts?
Well, it's hard to say that there's no influence there. It's funny, though. Yes, so that it kind of occurred to us. I don't really know much about Bill Watts. I know you're an Oklahoma guy.
Yeah.
So maybe that was your, territory when you were young. But that's one territory I know very little about. I'm not sure I've ever seen him on TV before or anything. I think I've just heard a few stories. But that was just kind of the general idea. It was sort of, a big old tough cowboy type that, you gotta watch yourself around.
Yeah, this was Mid-South territory. That was a little bit before my time. Okay. They were still running shows, but again, like I said, I'm going back and I'm looking at the history and then like with it being on WWE Network, I really want to get back into those days, because you saw like Ted DiBiase, Junkyard Dog, Dr. Death, Jim Ross, all.
It's funny. I knew that those guys all sort of came through that kind of staples of that territory. I for some reason I know that, but never. I mean, it's one territory. I guess unless you lived there during that time, you didn't get to see them on TV. or you go back and watch, I guess, old footage.
Yeah.
So I don't know too much about Watts, other than he was a tough bird.
Yes. And a failed executive for WCW.
Oh, he was okay.
Yes.
Run him along. Well, is there any other kind of executive from WCW?
Not really. You just kind of go in and cash your check until they're like, restructuring, get out.
This glorious disaster that we can enjoy.
As far as the final issue, I don't want to spoil it.
Yeah.
But, brother, you booked that main event the right way.
Oh, good. Thank you. I think we had other plans originally. And it was Matt who was like, well, what if we did it this way? And it is, I think, ultimately the right ending, right? I think it ended in the right, the way that it ends in the way it should end. And I have heard people say that they found it real satisfying, the way it finishes. And so thank you. I think so. It's a good story, and what's been gratifying, the response to it has been really, really, really good, thankfully. And the thing that we've heard the most is they said, it's fun and it's funny. And then what we hear a lot is you don't have to be a wrestling fan to really dig this story. It's about some wrestlers who, certainly bite off more than they can chew. And for Rock and Roll Rory Landell, I think it's a redemption story, but it's not even necessarily about wrestling. It's more about his journey, and it's like Galaxy Quest. I think Galaxy Quest meets the WWE. I mean, if you watch Galaxy Quest, I don't think you have to be a Star Trek fan to enjoy that film. It's just really fun and funny and cool. Hopefully that's what we have here, and I have heard we sent this out a lot to a lot of people, and it's been gratifying that there've been a lot of people who are comic book fans, not necessarily wrestling fans, and said, "Man, I really dug this," and that's been great.
Are you gonna sell the Rory shirt as merch? Because you should.
I wonder how that would do. I'd love to make T-shirts, but we'll see.
All right, I'm gonna do some rapid fire questions with you real quick, just a few. Okay. Hogan or Flair?
Oh, Flair. I just loved Flair. I saw Hogan wrestle Bundy in Portland, and I cheered for Bundy.
Your favorite championship belt of all time?
I like kind of the NWA one that Harley Race had, and then Flair took, and Dusty Rhodes, I think, had it once or twice. It's just kind of square and small, but it's the classic NWA World title belt.
Mine is not the most popular choice, but for some reason, the WCW United States Championship.
Okay.
It's that red, white, and blue just kind of pops.
Yeah. I will say that the NWA had one too, and that was always the U.S. belt was always kind of a cool belt. I think it was cooler than any intercontinental
also tied the U.S. tag belts in NWA.
Okay. Yeah. Those belts were cool. Yeah.
Yeah. The last wrestling show you went to?
I went to an indie show in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, where I got to meet King Kong Bundy and get his autograph and get a picture taken with him. And Doink the Clown was there.
Wow.
Tony Board was there.
I went to a Ring of Honor house show in Oklahoma City, which had the Bucks and Cody and all the AEW people were there. That before AEW, so about 4 years ago. The best entrance music of all time.
I know this is not super original, but again, when I was a kid, the Road Warriors came on the scene, and I don't think I'd ever heard Iron Man before wrestling, before the Road Warriors, and then I saw the Road Warriors live in Portland during the territory days. So that I heard that music. I guess a close second would be the Ric Flair 2001.
Yeah.
But, the Iron Man was like, the first time you've ever heard it, and then these the Road Warriors come out, and so the song is like really kicks ass.
See, I grew up a little bit. I grew up doing like the rock and wrestling, so Demolition and Hogan's Real American are like the ones for me. That's like, ooh.
If I need to pick me up, just watching that Land of like 1,000 Dances video on YouTube. It's like everybody is on drugs when they do.
Oh my gosh. So let's recap one more time the Kickstarter. We want to get this book funded, so go ahead and give out that information. What can they get? What's
okay? So we've got the Invasion from Planet Wrestletopia, all 6 issues, and they're finished. So this is a low risk deal. We're just wanting to print these things. So for $25, you can get, it doesn't include shipping, but you can get a beautiful trade volume book with some exclusive sort of bonus material that we haven't run in any of the digital versions of our 6 issues. And then just going up from there, even just slightly, like I think $30, you get this awesome Galacto Massacre mini poster. And moving up from there, you can get these really cool sets of trading cards of our wrestlers in the comic. Galacto Massacre trading cards. We took a lot of time to ensure that these rewards are sort of they're tied to the world and they're tied to the story, and they sort of build on the universe or the lore, I guess, of this little world that we're creating. We really took time. I mean, and I'm not knocking any creators or what have you, but we didn't just want to slap some concept art at the back of the trade that that we had lying around. We really took some time to make sure that whatever we do, posters, cards, back matter in the trade is special. I think that people, please come check out the Kickstarter. I promise it's fun, it's funny, and I promise it's got a good story with heart. Even if it's not your cup of tea, I guarantee you know somebody who would love to have it, for their birthday or whatever the heck. I don't know, Christmas or whatever. I don't know.
And the book's on Comixology, correct?
Yes, we had a little bit of it's a long story, but we had them on Comixology. We had to take them down. We're putting them back up, but they're all on Amazon Kindle. All 6 issues are all on iBooks. 2 or 3 of them are on Comixology right now, but they will all be up there before long. And so each of these single issues, which are available just digitally themselves, they each have some really cool, unique bonus material that remains exclusive to those issues. And we're really proud of that stuff. It's really fun. But then the trade that we're having this Kickstarter for will have its own, its own back matter. We won't just be reprinting bonus material that from the single issues. It'll have its own unique sort of bonus material, and so possibly you might enjoy buying all of that stuff. But if you just want to get the trade, that would be awesome. Please check it out if it interests you, right?
And it will. If you're a comic fan, if you're a wrestling fan, if you're both, this is the book for you. Invasion from Planet Wrestletopia. Ed, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Jarrod. It was a blast.
Thanks again to Ed Kuehnel for his time and for talking wrestling. It's really fun to talk wrestling with somebody, especially somebody who has knowledge of those old days of the territories and life before Vince McMahon. So yeah, once again, check out that Invasion from Planet Wrestletopia Kickstarter. We'll have the link in the show notes. And hopefully that book gets funded because I want that book in my hands. It's a great read. Go ahead and check it out. We will be back with more episodes soon. Go ahead and check out all our social media pages. We're on Twitter at Timeline Punch. We're on Instagram at Punch the Timeline. My other co-hosts will be back with me in no time. And once again, thank you for listening to Punch the Timeline. That's not how we do it in Texas. A Not in Texas production.